it's the Dynasty Roundtable. We're back again with some more rankings coming at you. This time, wide receiver rankings again. Our graphics team is, I don't know what they're doing.
Hard at work here.
We should probably fire them. I don't know, but yeah, here we are with our spreadsheet and our rankings that we are hard at work developing these rankings, and we're kind of aiming for February, start of February, maybe into February to have them completely finalized. And it's exciting because we're gonna put it on. We're gonna start a Patreon. We're aiming for February 1st for that as well. Probably nothing crazy to start. We haven't really hashed out all the details, but we know for sure what we want to do. We're just not exactly sure of all of how we want to do it. And I'm sure, some things will change, but the most important things will always be relatively the same, So anyway, that's my long-winded way of saying these are rankings that will be finalized here very shortly, and we're excited about, and we're excited to present them to you tonight. But more importantly, Matt Babich, how are you doing this evening? How's it going?
I'm doing well. We obviously kind of put this together backstage, and this is kind of the first time where our rankings start to really kind of differ here. So it's the first major update of the off season. And we're projecting for some rookies. We're projecting for some potential offensive changes. So it's very early on. And so hopefully we don't get too much flack for what our rankings are, because this is more about the thought process than anything. But this is probably going to be the most we've differed on a ranking show yet.
I can't wait. Let's go ahead and reveal the first 5 or so here.
Yeah, top 15 will be relatively mild, and then we start getting into the craziness. But
yeah, so there's nothing really crazy here. I mean, you have Jefferson 1, I have Chase 1. If I come back to this example all the time. If we were in a dynasty startup and we were, let's just say, deciding between Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and you were adamant, no, we need Justin Jefferson, I wouldn't fight you too hard on it, because both those players are awesome. And really, to be honest, these aren't really the conversations in Dynasty that intrigue me. Because I think most Dynasty leagues are won outside of the top 5 or 6 rounds, which, basically when we get into wide receivers like 15, 20, 25, I think that's where you can make some real hay in Dynasty. But I will say, making the argument for Chase, that he has Joe Burrow attached to him long term. He might have T. Higgins going away, and he just had his best season, I think. I mean, with Joe Burrow, because the defense was dreadful and Burrow had to throw about 50 times a game. So I don't know if we're going to get that next year, but it certainly looks like Jamar Chase's situation is pretty secure, and I think he might be the one, because I think he's going to be the 101 in redraft. He might be the guy who breaks the curse, the 101 curse, but who knows? But make the case for Jefferson, because I'm
do I have to make the case for that's. I understand, for the bit, giving the case for Jamar Chase, but really telling me in a serious tone to make the case for Justin Jefferson being wide receiver 1 dynasty is
that's fair.
It's just like Jamar Chase. We know what the case is.
Defend your position on Justin Jefferson. It's very easy to do.
Probably because he's that dude. My microphone volume just shot up. Fix that real quick. Yeah, Justin Jefferson, very consistent 4, 2, 5, and 3 over the past 4 seasons. He finished wide receiver 9. Sorry, that's fantasy points per game. Wide receiver 9 finish his rookie season. He's been far more consistent in terms of his yearly finish than Jamar Chase. But I don't think that necessarily dispels Chase. It is truly a preference. And again, same thing as you said. If we're in a dynasty league and you're like, hey, let's go Chase here, I'm like, okay. I might not even say, what about Jefferson? I'll probably just say, okay. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not a huge deal, but like we have that first tier, you have them 1, 2. You could truly argue, like you could start making the arguments for CeeDee Lamb, for Malik Neighbors to be back up in that tier. I know CeeDee Lamb didn't have the best year. Not only were there struggles with Dak early on in the season, and then there was Cooper Rush. He still finished wide receiver 7 in fantasy points per game after finishing as the wide receiver 1 the year before. And then down the stretch really started to kind of turn it on. Week 11 on, he had 19 points, 17, down game with 6, 21, 26, 17.5 to end the year. And that was with Cooper Rush. That was with not a lot of surrounding receiver talent. So let's not forget that CeeDee Lamb is still just an incredible talent. He's going to be drawing, a near, near 30% target share, just like Justin Jefferson, just like Jamar Chase, just like Malik Neighbors, apparently. And Neighbors went from, probably the worst quarterback play you could have fathomed going into his rookie season, and he did nothing but thrive. He was getting over 10 targets a game at one point. I don't know if he finished at that right. Yeah, 11.3. I kind of figured. Number 2 in the NFL in targets, led the league in target share, 3rd in air yard share. And again, as a rookie on this Giants team, finishing 6th in fantasy points per game. So truly, those two are on the heels of the other two. Now, you're going to have to do some convincing if we're in a startup draft and you're telling me that you want to take Malik Neighbors or CeeDee Lamb over either of those two guys. But to me, that's the conversation, is what is the difference of that tier gap? And is CeeDee Lamb going to be somebody who immediately kind of jumps back up into this tier 1 after a down year the following or the prior season?
Yeah, and you have to think there's so much we don't know at this stage in the game
Mm-hmm.
too. The Cowboys just dismissed Mike McCarthy in maybe the weirdest way possible by just letting his contract run out, and him and his entire staff or most of his staff will be replaced. So they are in the coaching market now, and all of a sudden, if you're a Ben Johnson, do you go? It just makes it so much more interesting, because do you think, well, I'll go
No
coach the
chance.
freaking Cowboys with Dak Prescott and what they have already established? I understand maybe it's kind of a mess with the cap situation. I do think Chicago's probably the best job.
It's the
Either
Jerry
them.
Jones situation.
Yeah, it's the Jerry Jones situation, and it's bizarre. It's just kind of bizarre and I saw a tweet today that Cooper Rush, they didn't let him get his like $250,000 bonus by playing whatever it was,
Yeah,
55% of this whatever the season or something. I don't
normal
know.
organizations would like convert that into a signing bonus or do something to say, hey, in the
Yeah.
best interest of getting Trey some playing time, we did screw you out of this incentive. So we are going to
Yeah.
convert, we're going to edit your contract, whatever needs to be done. I don't know how that works when they're a free agent, but I know a lot of times contracts are restructured to convert incentives into signing bonuses when that situation happens, but not Jerry Jones.
No.
That being said, to close my thoughts on this, if there's anybody to walk into that office and tell Jerry, look, you're not calling the shots, like this is going to be ran my way, and I'm going to have an input on who is selected and who is signed onto our team, it would be him, because he kind of controls his own destiny here right now. So it's
Yep.
interesting to see if that avenue gets explored. I don't think Ben Johnson's the type, though, to just be Jerry Jones's crony. That doesn't seem like the type of guy that he is.
No, no. The more I find out about Ben Johnson, the more I'm really pulling for him to be the Bears coach, since Mike Vrabel's off the board. But
Monken would be
anyway,
interesting, though, if the Cowboys
yeah,
decided to nab Monken. That
yeah.
would be, I think, a really good fit, or Joe Brady.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that both of those guys, and then you have,
It's going to be
of
Kellen Moore,
course,
though.
yeah, yeah, well, maybe. Of course, you have Malik Neighbors too, with that terrible situation, coaching wise and GM wise, where the coach legitimately could be. I mean, because if you look about around that division, the Eagles are going to be good, the Commanders are going to be good again. They're probably going to have a rookie quarterback. I mean, I don't know what the Giants are doing, but Malik Neighbors, we know, is going to gobble up just, I don't know,
Right.
180 targets next year. I don't know. Like it could be insane. So I'm gonna reveal the next five here. Let's see. There we go. And I don't think we disagree too much here. I think
No.
basically we have you're higher on Nico Collins than I am. I have Puka, and where you have Nico Collins, we're right lock in step with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Brian Thomas Jr. and AJ Brown. You're a tad higher on Drake London. I mean, is there anything here that you want to point out or talk about, or because I this
Not
again feels like we're pretty
not
much
really.
lockstep here.
And not really. Again, we're lockstep on Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would lump Nico Collins into that second tier. I think 7 as a composite score is pretty fair to
Yeah.
have him at right there. So having Nico and Brian kind of be that middling wide receiver 3 tier, I think that's pretty fair to put them in. And then AJ Brown, Drake London, again, I think our composites order these players pretty nicely.
Yeah, if I like these two tiers right here, like honestly, if you, I could easily put Nico Collins and Brian Thomas Jr. up a tier. Um,
I think
so
it's a good opportunity though to kind of. I mean, there are rankings and we will put our tiers on them, but for the sake of the conversation, like tearing down from Puka to Nico or Brian Thomas Jr. right now, like that feels. We're talking about putting them in potentially the same tier, but I don't think the Dynasty community as a whole would have them in the same tier.
yeah,
So I think a tier
hmm
down from Puka to one of these guys is a really appetizing off-season move to explore.
yeah. And of course, it depends on the league and all that stuff.
Of
But
course.
you ready for the next five or so?
Ready to go.
All right, so we're already halfway home. Once we, who knows, maybe we'll go a little bit
This
further
is where the
down.
real
But
conversations start kind of happening.
um, yes, exactly. So sorry, I just got an exciting notification that kind of distracted me there for a second.
Oh.
Yeah, kind of big news, but nothing fantasy wise. But so we have Garrett Wilson. Wow, I am much higher on Garrett Wilson than you
Always
are.
have been.
Yes, that's very much on brand for me. Jackson Smith and Jigba, I have at 12. Lad McConkey were pretty much the same. You have raised Rashi Rice to the roof, although we're not that different on Rashi Rice. I think we're very pro. I think both of us are probably higher than consensus on Rashi Rice because I think, and we've talked about this before. I think we understand that short-term viewpoint of a player because he's still tainted by the cloud of, oh well, he's going to be suspended. He's coming off of an injury, and to that I would say it's only 6 weeks, and the injury doesn't like the injury. If anything, it's more time for him to rehab from the injury and for him to get ready to roll starting on week 7. If he indeed does miss 6 weeks, you know what I mean?
I feel
Like,
like it just grows more likely too that suspension's not 6 weeks. Like if he stays
yeah,
out of if he perfectly stays out of trouble until this sentence is handed out, like it just we're not talking about like an incredible length of absence. And then the most important thing to me was what I saw with the Kansas City Chiefs without Rashi Rice this year. We did not see Xavier Worthy really take over into a meaningful role until the last few weeks of the season. And even then, a lot of force feed targets, a lot of screens, like a lot of I don't want to say that like the Chiefs are just kind of wishing things into existence, but it's kind of been the game plan they've been running offensively. Like they've been trying to put Marquise Brown like slash Xavier Worthy into the Rashee Rice role. And they've just been really trying to hodgepodge what they wanted their offensive identity to be this whole time. And that just gave me all the confirmation of like this passing offense runs through Rashee Rice right now when he is healthy, and nothing is going to change in 2025 when he is back on the field. He's going to be the target hog. And so if we want to talk about, putting him 15, behind some of these guys like Lad McConkey, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, sure. I'm all for it. There is some uncertainty there. Absolutely. That being said, again, I still find myself to be a dynasty manager where I think maybe it's hubris, but I can survive 6 weeks of not having Rashee Rice to start the year.
Yeah.
Uh, so if I miss him for 6 weeks for one season right now, then like so be it. I have an infinite amount of probabilities that anyone on my roster blows their knee out tomorrow and is out for an extended period of time. So like these are the games of chance that we take, and we even made an argument on a different episode that 6 weeks of Rashee Rice not getting hurt could end up being a positive down the road. Like I know in my redraft league, like AJ Brown went down early on in the year, and had I not had him, in the long run, then I wouldn't have won, my redraft league there. So you never know how the chips will fall. And so I think overreacting to 6 weeks that are not injury related absences, is kind of missing the point here.
Agreed. It's very similar to, and in this case, it really didn't work out, but I think it's similar to the TJ Hawkinson conversation that we were having heading into this past season. And we were both saying, get the discounted TJ Hawkinson while you can. It just so happens that I think you can still get discounted TJ Hawkinson right now. Maybe not as discounted as it was, because when he came back, he really didn't perform the way that we might have thought. Like he had a couple nice weeks, but really there was a lot of weeks where he was finishing underneath 10 fantasy points. Like he finishes the tight end 5 in week 12 and the tight end 5 in week 10. But outside of that, there really wasn't much. But the difference with Rashee Rice is we saw it. We saw a glimpse of it, of what it was gonna be for the rest of the season. Like the Chiefs peeled the curtain back to how that they plan to use Rashee Rice potentially for his entire time in Kansas City, however long he's there, with Patrick Mahomes, and it was working. Like it was like he was averaging. I don't have it pulled up right away, and it's skewed too, because I think I'm pulling it up right now because I'm going off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure his fantasy points per game is a little bit skewed because he exited really early in that week 4 game when he got hurt. It was either week 4 or 5, as my computer is really thinking long and hard about whether or not it's going to pull up the page or not. All right, there we go. Yeah, so he left that Chargers game after just running 2 routes. Mm-hmm. And before, and those
it does count that as a game played.
Yeah, and so it skews it, which skews it, and some people won't look past that. But if you tally up his fantasy points per game output for those 3 weeks, and I get it, it's 3 weeks, but you're talking 20 fantasy points per game, over 20 fantasy points per game. I think it might actually be 20 fantasy points per game. Let me do some quick back of the computer math here real quick.
That's the exact thesis, right? Is like he's stepping into a 20-point per game role tethered to the most talented quarterback in the NFL with the best offensive coach in the NFL and Andy Reid. There's nothing there. I have a very hard time starting to rank Rashee Rice outside of the top 12 without really wish casting somebody into a more prominent role. And that's why you need to sell me on Garrett Wilson without using ifs, buts, or coconuts.
Well, he had the best season he's had so far.
Yawn.
Yeah, I mean, he finished as what did he finish as?
18. Wide
receiver 18. And I would be interested to see what his output was before general manager Aaron Rodgers decided to just tank the entire. Well, wide receiver 10 is what he finished as, according to Player Profiler. That's through 18 weeks, I guess. You could be.
Fantasy points per game.
Wide receiver 10 overall. But
that doesn't matter.
But we're talking about a guy, 153 targets this year. He's averaged well over 150 targets in every season that he's played. And the problem with him is he's just had to endure terrible quarterback play. And that includes Aaron Rodgers. And the play really has been inconsistent. Because if you look at the first 4 weeks, wide receiver 29, 33, 29, 60. Then in week 5, wide receiver 5 week 6 wide receiver 2, and I believe that's about the time they traded for Devontae Adams, if memory serves correct.
I
And
believe Pittsburgh was Adams' first game.
okay, so that would be week 7,
I think.
and he finished wide receiver 20 that week, and then in week 9, you have a wide receiver 2 overall finish, but there's a lot of ups and downs there, and so you're probably thinking for Garrett Wilson, he is. I bet if we looked at best ball points added, he was probably pretty decent. I don't have that stat pulled up right now. But
He was 17th.
okay, maybe not as good as I thought.
So,
but I will admit that the situation is not necessarily ideal because the Jets are kind of a disaster with their ownership, and they're not going to get Ben Johnson. In fact, Ben Johnson turned him down, so they're going to probably get a tier B or a tier 2 or a tier 3 coach, or a tier B or a tier C coach, however you want to look at that.
They've been rumored for Arthur Smith, by the way. There's rumored interest there.
Which would be bad, but like I mean, if let's just say if Matt Nagy's the coach, because I've heard his name thrown around too. This is a guy who's going to get a lot of targets. I mean, historically, he's averaged 150 targets a season, well over. At age 24, we had a prototype or a like a build that we like, 6 feet tall, 184 pounds. I get it. He hasn't really put it together from a fantasy points per game standpoint, but I can't really ignore the target share nor some of the other metrics that point to the fact that he should be much better than he is. But
yeah,
I hope I avoided using ifs, ands, or buts or whatever, or coconuts or whatever you said.
You did, and that is why your argument was so weak, unfortunately.
Oh, well. Okay.
So what's concerning is the best case scenario for him is Adams and Aaron Rodgers returning next year. But look, he's gotten a lot of targets. Targets haven't done jack for him. Is his first season above 13 fantasy points per game, like 30, 32, and 18. It finishes in fantasy points per game. They're not bad. And again, I don't want to besmirch the name of Garrett Wilson. I think he's a very talented receiver that has been just like similarly to Drake London before this season, just got buried by terrible situation, bad quarterback play, bad play calling. And so I do want it to be known that in a very good situation, I do think Garrett Wilson is a top 10 talent. I cannot rank him there anymore because situation matters a lot. Garrett Wilson is a very good player, and situation has made us think that he is not a good player based on his analytics. I mean, look at any number, any metric. Yards per route run, I think his highest finish is 29th among receivers, which is not great. He's getting a lot of the opportunity, but without a good quarterback, without a good play calling, without a good defense, you're playing from behind, you're playing with bad field position. This is very tough to overcome. And this is not something that's going to happen in a season, in an off season, barring a miracle. So, and again, like I say all these negative things, I got him at 14, but yeah. I just don't think he can be a top 10 guy above guys like Rashee Rice quite yet.
Would it be fair to say that this is a classic case of...
I have him at 15. I have 2 14s, by the way, but sorry, continue.
Oh, it's numbers. Yeah. There, we can fix that right now. 15? There we go. So, okay, that still has him at 11. But is this a classic case of great player, terrible situation? Is it that simple?
100%. Like, let's snap our fingers, right? And we give the New York Jets Todd Monken and Sam Darnold this offseason. Not out of the realm of possibility, but unlikely. I immediately will change my stance. I might not move him up from 15 super quickly, but if he's going to be the number one target in what's known to be a productive offense with Sam Darnold, the guy who looks to have turned things around with his career in Minnesota, like that is just such a different outlook than playing with Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers again next year.
I'm laughing a little bit because
Or
it would
Jameis even could probably work.
Jameis. Well, yeah, Jameis I think is a top 32 quarterback regardless of how you feel about his
I fully agree.
turnover proneness. But I'm just laughing because Sam Darnold back in New York would be hilarious.
It would be hilarious, but like that
Yeah.
is the situation that Jets fans should be like. That's one of the situations that they should be clamoring for right now. Jets should be going after Monken, Cohen, Joe Brady, somebody like that.
Yeah, if they can get it, if they could get Joe Brady, I think that would be a home run. They're picking at 7 right now, so they're probably out of the Shedeur Sanders,
Yeah,
Cam Ward. They'd probably have to take a flyer on somebody in the second round, or who knows what'll happen with draft seasons. There's quarterbacks that fly up the board
Jets
all the
need to trade
time.
down at 7. I would imagine like they have to be a prime trade down candidate.
I would assume so. I would assume so. But they definitely need I mean, it's similar to the Steelers. Like the Jets. What would be wrong with luring Russell Wilson away from Pittsburgh or Justin Fields, and then drafting, I don't know, Jalen Milroe in the second round if he falls that far, or Jackson Dart, or whoever, Quinn Ewers if he comes out, like one of these guys that you can maybe
You get the right
develop.
play caller, man. Like the world is essentially your oyster. I mean, Joe Flacco's winning games in 2025. Like it is possible.
So anyway, like I agree with you. I think maybe I have Garrett Wilson a little bit too high just because the situation isn't anywhere close to like the situation Lad McConkey has, for example, or like I have him right below Brian Thomas Jr. Brian Thomas Jr. is in an amazing situation, assuming Trevor Lawrence comes back healthy as the alpha wide receiver. I mean, who knows? Jacksonville might sign or might hire Ben Johnson. He's rumored to be interested in that job. So yeah, I should probably be closer. I should probably have him maybe 13 or 14 instead of at number 9. But
yeah, that's why we have these conversations.
That's right. And let us know what you think in the chat. All right, let's reveal. Let's take it through the top 20. So we have T. Higgins, Roma Dunze, Zay Flowers, Travis Hunter, the emergence of our first rookie, and probably our biggest disagreement so far with the rankings on Travis Hunter and Jordan Addison. So this all depends, and I know we've had this conversation what feels like a million times already, but if you're hearing this for the first time, let me just say this. I fully acknowledge that Travis Hunter might play cornerback. In fact, he might play cornerback more than he plays wide receiver. But if you have not seen the All-22 film breakdown that's on my channel, the Seth Dewald on YouTube, it's weird saying your name like in the third person like that. But if you YouTube the Seth Dewald Fantasy Football channel, you will and look for Travis Hunter All-22 breakdown. I highlight several plays of him as a wide receiver and corner. And I think, it's just my personal opinion, I know Cody Carpentier disagrees, that he's a better wide receiver or more talented wide receiver than he is a cornerback. That's not to diminish his skills as a cornerback, because he's probably, like if I was putting out a top 50 big board, which maybe I'll do someday, Travis Hunter's my favorite player in this draft so far from what I've seen. He's amazing. Like, he's an athletic freak. He's a great corner. I think he's a great wide receiver. My comp for him, and I'm trying not to be hyperbolic when I say that there's a play on the All-22 breakdown that reminds me of something Justin Jefferson would do. So, again, this is a lot of projecting, and I'll probably be a lot closer to where is he at 19 for you? Or
yeah, I don't know why the formula didn't. I saw 24 and I was like, I just edited that. I know that's not right. I went back to the sheet and he was at 19. For when I copied it over, it just didn't get copied over right.
So we're in lockstep then on this more so, because I was like getting ready to fight, and now I was like I didn't need to fight.
Doesn't sound right.
I was making the hardcore case for Travis Hunter, but
yeah, I mean,
it depends. Like, we're kind of in limbo with Travis Hunter. Don't you agree?
But why? I mean, I think we both kind of went, let's rank it if he's a full-time wide receiver.
Yep.
Because as of right now, I don't. I know other people will say different things. As of right now, I think that's the more probable outcome at this current point in time. Think about it. Like, look, I understand having like a lockdown corner would be awesome, and having. Do you think Travis Hunter wants to be a second lockdown corner for a team? Like, no, probably not. And we're in an offensive league, right? Like, it doesn't matter how good your defense is. If you give a Pat Mahomes offense, 10 tries or however many, like 8 to 10 tries, they're gonna score a bunch of points. You give the Bills multiple cracks at your defense, they're going to put up points. Like, you as an offense have to be of another realm to be a true elite Super Bowl contender. So I think, like you said, I think Travis Hunter, you see the shades of Justin Jefferson-esque. I know I'm going to be very careful not to make that actual comparison. But film that stands out, not just in a technical way, but his twitch, his breakaway speed. I mean, it's all there. And I tend to agree with you where I was watching Justin Jefferson, and like 2020 was a class where I learned a lot. Like it was my first film study across wide receivers. I didn't do very well at ranking across the board, but I really learned. Like, Justin Jefferson was like the perfect case of like, okay, when I go back and look at college film, like what I saw with Justin Jefferson, that's example of good film. You start applying these cases as you see guys like CeeDee Lamb come out, and you add to this memory bank of like watching these good receivers play college ball. And you get that memory when you watch Travis Hunter. Like, I feel like I'm watching one of these elite guys to come out of these rookie classes. So he could be just a spectacular talent. And let's say he truly does, like, go to the Patriots, for example, to be their number one guy. Again, maybe not from a team building perspective, the most ideal way to build out your roster, but that's going to be a fantasy gold mine with a new offensive, forward thinking offensive coordinator, hopefully, and Drake May.
Yeah, I think that would be a home run pick if he slid all the way to 4. Man, like, you start to look at the potential landing spots for him. I mean, they're all the same landing spots that we talked about with Ted McMillan, I guess, or that we talked about with Ted McMillan previously, not yet because we haven't gotten to Ted McMillan yet. But like he's unbelievable to me. But so I agree with you. We're in lockstep on Travis Hunter. Let's fight a little bit about Jordan Addison. Tell me why Jordan Addison is outside the top 25 for you.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like he was much higher when I did my rankings on my phone earlier today. I can't find that, but 19 is a good number for him. He finished at 22 this year, so I think 26 is a little low. Going through, just who's around that. DJ Moore, I need to drop. Like, 22 is too high for him. Terry McLaurin, I don't know, he's gonna be 30, but like, he was incredible this year. Devonta Smith's in this weird limbo situation where it's like, can he put a whole season together to be an elite asset? So I feel like outside of 20, I just kind of got into this limbo range where I wasn't really sure where to put some of these people, and now kind of rethinking it. A guy like Addison, who really came along at the end of this year, like, not very efficient. Again, still not drawing a huge target share over the full course of the season, but we look at week 11 on, and there's a clear uptick in the role. 8, 9, 6, 12, 9, 8, 8, 6 targets to close the season. A red zone target in every game in that stretch. I believe he had 10, 12, 14, 15 red zone targets overall in that 8-game stretch. He had 7 touchdowns in that stretch, and he had 2 30-point fantasy games, multiple over 12 and 15 fantasy points. So there's really a lot to like. He's a budding receiver, year 2. I do think, though, he's still in that like big play dependent archetype where he's going to have to continuously have these 10 plus touchdown seasons to break into that top 20. That being said, like I just mentioned, like I do think I have some guys misranked. George Pickens, I'm sure we'll talk about. I don't really know what to do with him right now. DJ Moore, I'm openly admitting I have ranked too high as of right now. So I think he's kind of in a weird, ambiguous spot, but I think he deserves to be put up at least 22. Right now, 22, 23 is probably where I'm going to end up putting him at.
Yeah, I think that's I'm a little bit above consensus on Jordan Addison because of the age, because I'm such a big fan of Kevin O'Connell and what he's doing offensively. Jordan Addison doesn't have the upside because Justin Jefferson's always going to be there,
Right.
but I've seen it twice now. Once with Kirk Cousins and once with Sam Darnold, and they have Daniel Jones and J.J. McCarthy waiting in the wings. And I mean, I think that's a pretty good bet that one of those two guys is going to be the starting quarterback for the Vikings in 2025. And I think they'll be, at least decent enough to get the ball out in the system. And yeah, Jordan Addison, you said it, he's kind of more touchdown dependent than you might think, because he did have 9 touchdowns this year, 10 last year. And but this is an offense that scores touchdowns.
Yep, that's what I was going to follow up with. But hey, if they're going to be scoring touchdowns.
And they play in that dome, so you never have to worry really about the weather conditions. And unless they go, obviously they got to go to Green Bay and Chicago in the division. But like I just sometimes we overthink Dynasty, and I think some people could really overthink it when it comes to Jordan Addison. Sure, is he going to put up a stinker every once in a while? Yeah, that'll happen. And that, there were like 3 or 4 games in a row there at the beginning of the season, well, just 3 actually, where he scored less than 10 fantasy points per game. But then, he follows it up with a 16-point performance, then a 4, then a 15, then a 30, then a 9, then a 39. That's kind of the roller coaster ride that you have to ride with Jordan Addison. But if you're sticking him in your flex every week, it's probably worth putting him there. So
right.
We are pretty much right in lockstep. The only other player I might mention is Rome Odunze, and we're pretty much we have him at 17. I am very bullish on Rome Odunze going forward because I think and I don't know what you think about this, but I think there's a real possibility he winds up being the Bears' number 1 wide receiver, maybe as soon as next season, just based on the small sample size that we saw with him and Caleb Williams. And I think Keenan Allen kind of gummed up the works this year. I don't really have much evidence that supports my opinion other than, he's a top 10 pick paired with the quarterback. Is very intentional there that the Bears and maybe this is a flawed way of thinking. They wanted to get their quarterback weapons. And what they didn't realize was, we kind of overestimated our ability to evaluate offensive linemen and get good deals with offensive line. And the offensive line wasn't as good as they thought, and Caleb wasn't as good as they thought, if we're being honest. And I think that hurt Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen's presence in the offense as well. And Keenan Allen's not going to be with the Bears in 2025. So that really opens up a role for Rome Odunze. And when you really kind of start to look at his profile and you think about what kind of a wide receiver he is, he can really do it all. I mean, he can line up outside. You could put him in the slot. My guess is, just kind of having watched DJ Moore play this year, the Bears use him on a lot of bubble screens. They don't really use DJ Moore the way that I think they should, really, because I think DJ Moore is kind of more suited as a Deebo Samuel-esque type player, maybe a little bit more versatile than that, but that's kind of how the Bears used him, and I think they view Rome Odunze as more of a legitimate prototype number 1 wide receiver. So again, I don't really have much evidence that supports my opinion other than, hey, air yards. He finished number 14.
He was the 9th overall pick. That's another.
Yeah, number 14 amongst wide receivers in air yards, yet he finished as the wide receiver 49 on the season. So, like, that's not nothing, I don't think. But yeah, I think there's some serious upside with Rome Odunze, just a 22-year-old wide receiver who I think got a really tough draw in his first season in a situation that looked good but really wasn't that good if you thought about it.
Yep.
All right, let's
That
move.
was 30 minutes on 10 through 20.
Was it? Oh my
Yes.
god. Sorry.
Yes.
Let's move. Let's move a little bit quicker then. That's my fault. I wanted to talk about Roma Dunze very selfishly. So let's just reveal 20 through 30 then, so we can, because there's a good football game on tonight. Not that we would ever rush
Shoot, I
content.
forgot about that. I just started.
So, yeah. So starting with Jordan Addison, or starting with Devonta Smith and going down to Jaden Reed. This is our 21 through 30, and this might be the biggest disparities here, especially when it comes to Brandon Ayuk, Jaden Reed, Xavier Worthy. This might George Pickens.
Well, it makes sense, right? These players are in very, very
Yeah.
fluid situations. Like we really
Yeah.
have no idea what's going to happen for a lot of these guys. I think Brandon Ayuk is in a pretty solid spot. Like he was 23 in fantasy points per game in 2022, 16th in fantasy points per game in 2023. I know he struggled to start the year. He did kind of start to come on a little bit. He had a 147-yard performance in week 5, but I'm not willing to let 5 bad weeks kind of push me off of what I saw from Brandon Ayuk from a really long time, and that's he's a really good ball player. And I just find it hard to believe that Jawan Jennings, who wasn't breaking out before Brandon Ayuk got hurt and did a good job after, is all of a sudden gonna usurp him in this role. I don't know what they're going to do. They have too many mouths to feed for sure. Cliche alert, but with Ricky Pearsall and Jawan Jennings there, but I'm still comfortable with Brandon Ayuk being the lead dog in that passing game going into next year. But I could be very, very wrong here in about 3 months. It's just depending on, or maybe not 3 months, but as mini camp goes on, like we're gonna have to figure out news of like what are they gonna do with Jawan Jennings. What's going on with what's going to happen with Debo, all these things can impact it greatly, but he's certainly a top 20 talent as he's shown before.
Yeah, I mean, they got a deal done with them in the offseason, leading into the season before they traded him to the Steelers, and then that fell through or whatever, at least from what my recollection of the offseason with him. But so, yeah, he and Ricky Pearsall, I think, are probably the safest 2 receivers in that system with Kyle
Agreed.
Shanahan. So, yeah, there's every possibility I have him far too low. In fact, looking at it right now, I probably should have him closer to, the lower 20s. 20 is a little bit rich for me. Because this is a team that's going to have to make some tough decisions if they're going to sign Brock Purdy to a long-term deal. Now, I could very well see the 49ers just saying, well, forget that. We'll just go out and get Sam Darnold or Kirk Cousins or somebody like that, and they'll be able to do 80% of what Brock Purdy can do, although Kirk Cousins might be a tough sell at this point. But yeah, there is some uncertainty there, but I would agree with you. I think Ayuk is a little bit safer than those other options, especially Debo Samuel. DJ Moore, to me, like the reason I have him so low is because of what I said about Roma Dunze. I kind of feel if I'm going to be higher on Roma Dunze, I can't be as high on DJ Moore. And I was super high on DJ Moore coming into this season because I thought, he's going to be the number 1 option, even though there's a lot of mouths to feed, cliche alert, in Chicago. I thought Roma Dunze wouldn't have necessarily the best season, and that turned out to be true. But DJ Moore didn't have the best season either. So there's just a lot of uncertainty with Chicago as well because, in my lifetime, they've always kind of messed up the coaching situation. So we'll see if they hire another Matt Eberflus. But another name on this list that I found interesting, Jaden Reed. I didn't think I would be higher on Jaden Reed than you. So why so low on Jaden Reed?
Um, Gosh, let's see. Probably because he had 2 20-point games since week 4. Like, he just doesn't get used. He had one game over 7 targets all year. I'm done having Jaden Reed in the top 30 until he can prove to me that he's actually going to get on the field. He's going to draw targets because we love him as an explosive playmaker, but maybe he really is just a gadget. Like, I don't know. There's got to be a reason why Matt LaFleur isn't playing him. Regardless of whether there is or isn't, he's not getting on the field. He was only 61st in routes run, 73rd in route participation percentage. And it's all around ugly. His 60th in target share. It's just so ugly for Jaden Reed. And I yeah, there's just not enough usage there. Matt LaFleur has to come to my house personally and tell me that he's going to be used more for me to move him up. I just can't see how he turns into a top 24 receiver next year.
Yeah, and looking at the numbers, I think I agree with you because the snap share I think is the most alarming thing to me because there are some weeks where he's in the 50%, 50th percent of snap share, so he's playing just a little bit over 50% of the snaps, and like you said, his route participation rate is a lot of weeks it's in the 60%, like in the 60s. So that's not great, and then you talk about and his close to the season too was just absolutely brutal. If you had him in the fantasy playoffs, I mean weeks 15 and 16 were okay, 11 fantasy points, but 1.6 fantasy points in championship week against Minnesota in a really good matchup because Minnesota was good against the run, not necessarily good against the pass. And we have to also talk about Jordan Love when we talk about Jaden Reed. How good is Jordan Love? I still don't know if I know. I think he's okay, but I still believe that this production that we've seen from Jordan Love is a result of the system that Matt LaFleur runs. Like, I think they're going to have, I mean, I guess they've already signed Jordan Love to a contract, which, you know, who I guess he's going to be just fine getting them to the playoffs and then getting booted in the first round. But outside of that, I don't see a ton of upside with Jordan Love like I saw maybe coming into the season, but I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just ever rotating. Sometimes he's good, sometimes he's bad. I don't really know. I know he's not consistent.
Yeah. And there all of a sudden you have a lot of weapons there too, you know. Romeo Dubs is okay. I know Christian Watson's dealt with injuries, but Tucker Kraft emerged this season. Talking about Jordan Love, I mean, 3,300 passing yards. I know he missed a couple games, 25 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, but in 2023, when he was 5th amongst quarterbacks in fantasy points per game, this year 16th amongst quarterbacks in fantasy points per game. So a bit of a drop off, and I that's kind of how I feel. You know, 16th is probably, when we get around to quarterbacks, is probably about where I'm going to have Jordan Love. And the last player is Xavier Worthy on here that we have a major disagreement with. So tell me why, and I guess I made the case for you for Jaden Reed, so I guess I'm going to have to lower him down my rankings, but I don't know. 36 seems a little bit too low, but
No,
I think 30 I think 30 is this is why we have a composite. I think
if he's
30 's
never
fine.
going to be a valuable wide receiver 2 on your fantasy team, it doesn't even matter if I have him at 50. He's not valuable to your team.
Yeah.
And Mika Egbuka is going to be miles more valuable next year than Jaden Reed, and I'm willing to stake my reputation on that. Fantasy receipts. I'll clip this and send it to fantasy receipts myself. But Xavier Worthy, look, again, it's just I don't know what's going to happen next year. I do know that with Rashee Rice, he was not really a priority. Granted, they're at two. It's at an interesting point where these were Xavier Worthy's first games in the NFL, before Rashee Rice exited with the injury in week 4. But he really struggled to be consistent. What I didn't like was his body control on the boundaries, his sideline knowledge. Like, it seemed like a lot of little things that were causing disconnects between Patrick Mahomes and Xavier Worthy, and they never really got that sorted out. In fact, they had to kind of turn him into a lower A dot merchant. In fact, because in Pittsburgh, he had 79 receiving yards, 8 receptions. Player Profiler says 6 air yards. I know that's not right, but as someone who watched that whole game, it was a lot of screens. So 6 actually might not be that far off because there were multiple like -3-yard passes. But again, like if we're going to get a gadget scheme merchant, I just don't think that's somebody who deserves to be in the top 24 receivers. If Rashee Rice were not a factor and they were building this offense around Xavier Worthy, I would say something different. And it's really just a schematic knock for the archetype of Xavier Worthy. And I don't necessarily project him to get mile leaps and bounds better going into next year. I can see like if he has a 10 touchdown year, he'll probably finish as like wide receiver 26, somewhere around there, like a Jordan Addison type year that may happen. And so that's where he's kind of at 30. And again, like he'll probably move up a couple of spots. There are some people I need to shuffle around as we had this discussion, but there's no reason for him not to be in the top 30. I think 30 might be on the lower side of things, and I'm okay with that for now, at least.
Yeah, just kind of looking at the usage. I hate to say this again, but I think I agree with you because starting in week 14 is when the usage really picked up, like at least in terms of him being on the field. Because in weeks 14 through 17, the lowest snap percentage was 81.9%. Outside of that, he didn't get into the 80s until week 14, and it did affect his targets, but he had some games where he had 8 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets. But then you just didn't have the difference between being on the field 80% of the time and 60% of the time is that very much lowers your chances of having a game where you have, I don't know, 2 targets and 0 receptions like he had against Tampa Bay in week 9, where he had -1 fantasy points. And I remember some of the Fantasy Pros guys when I was, I do some producing work for them, laughing about that and how comically bad of a fantasy performance that was. But he did finish the year strong, but you have to wonder, okay, are they going to re-sign Marquise Hollywood Brown? We know Rashee Rice is going to be back at some point. So could be potentially, again, I think I might be a touch high on Xavier Worthy, and it might be a nice tear down moment. Like if you could tear down to Jordan Addison, I don't really see much difference between Xavier Worthy and Jordan Addison, really.
I like that.
So anyway, I think we
did it.
I think we did it. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, just bear with us through our process here. This is our first kind of iteration, and we usually kind of go back to the drawing board as we have these conversations and figure out where our process wasn't as sound. But you can follow me on Twitter at Babbage_Matt10. Follow the socials on the show, and keep tuning in.
Yep, at Seth_Dewald, DIEWOLD. And I have to say, I watched the first episode of the Aaron Rodgers documentary last night, and I don't know if having a new respect for Aaron Rodgers. I think that's a bit strong of me to say, but
perspective, maybe
a different perspective is probably closer, because I didn't realize. I don't know if you knew this or not, but I guess in high school, like when he was a freshman, sophomore in high school, he was like 5'6", 130 pounds or something crazy, light like that, and just a really hard worker. Of course, this documentary is trying to pump him up and whatever. But anyway, it was interesting. It wasn't. I thought I would watch it and like laugh at it almost, which didn't end up happening. So anyway, it's interesting. It's an interesting documentary. There is some ayahuasca that gets smoked, just so
I'm sure.
Just so you know. But anyway, that's going to do it for us. But the story of Dynasty continues as it always does. There's no off season in Dynasty. For Matt Babich, for Seth Dewald, we will see you next time. Be good, everybody.